Papoose and Claressa Shields did not just send Remy Ma a cease-and-desist letter over a rap record. They accidentally turned a private divorce dispute into the most public advertisement for Remy's song That Money Could Buy. And the detail everybody keeps skating past is the part that changes the entire story. According to reports, Papoose attorney Shelley Albert sent the letter to Remy Ma's attorney Diane Bowman on April 18th, after Remy released W.Y.F.L. On April 10th, while the two sides were reportedly still discussing non-disparagement terms in their divorce matter. So the same situation that was supposedly being contained through legal paperwork was being dragged right back into the public conversation through legal paperwork. That is not a normal rap response. That is not somebody jumping on a beat, recording a freestyle, or posting a sharp caption. That is a rapper reaching for a courtroom strategy because a song struck a nerve. And before anybody says, well, this is just about protecting a child, understand that the family concerns may be real, and any parent has the right to take those concerns seriously. But the public question is still sitting right there. If the song does not identify Papoose or Claressa Shields by name, what exactly is being demanded, and what happens when a private legal disagreement becomes part of the entertainment machine? Because this is bigger than Remy versus Papoose. Personally, it affects their reputations, their divorce, their daughter, and the way every future statement will be interpreted. Culturally, it raises the uncomfortable question of whether rap is still a space where artists can answer accusations through music, or whether every aggressive bar now comes with a lawyer attached. And systemically, it exposes the strange collision between family court, celebrity branding, boxing promotion, streaming platforms, and the attention economy. The song became bigger because the letter gave everybody a new chapter to discuss. And when we get to the part about what a cease-and-desist letter actually does, what it does not do, and why a threatened defamation claim is not the same thing as a court ruling, you are going to understand why this may have been intended as damage control, but functioned like a megaphone. The people trying to remove the song may have made sure the entire culture pressed play. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So, let's establish the situation carefully, because online commentary has a way of turning a messy story into a cartoon before anybody checks the timeline. Remy Ma and Papoose, whose legal name is Shamal Maki, have had a highly public relationship for years. They built a public image around loyalty, partnership, and surviving difficult circumstances together. That history matters because this was never just two random rappers trading insults. The audience watched the relationship become part of both artists' identities. Papoose was often presented as the supportive husband standing beside Remy during major periods of her life, while Remy was presented as the established artist whose relationship represented endurance in an industry known for instability. That is why the breakup created such a sharp reaction. When a relationship that has been marketed as strong begins to unravel publicly, fans do not process it like a simple breakup between private citizens. They process it like the collapse of a storyline they invested in. Every old interview gets replayed. Every caption gets reinterpreted. Every lyric sounds like evidence. Every new partner becomes part of a larger argument about who is telling the truth first. The public conflict became increasingly intense through accusations, responses, social media posts, and competing explanations about what happened inside the marriage. Those claims have come from both sides, and many of them remain disputed allegations rather than facts established by a court. That distinction is important. We can analyze public statements and documented filings without pretending that every accusation has been proven. The internet wants a winner immediately. Legal proceedings do not work that way. A viral clip can produce a verdict in 10 seconds, but an actual legal dispute can take months or years to resolve. Then Claressa Shields entered the center of the conversation. Shields is not just a celebrity girlfriend in the ordinary sense. She is a major boxing champion with a public identity built around dominance, confidence, and competitive toughness. Her brand is connected to winning, confrontation, and refusing to shrink herself for anybody. Papoose is also a rapper with a long history in hip-hop, a reputation for technical lyricism, and a public image that has been tied to being prolific and battle-tested. So when Remy releases a song that appears to address accusations that Papoose wrote some of her material, while also appearing to take shots at Shields and their relationship, the conflict suddenly sits at the intersection of two performance cultures. Rap beef is built on implication, exaggeration, coded references, and the audience's ability to connect dots. Boxing promotion is built on rivalry, confidence, verbal pressure, and turning personal tension into public attention. Both worlds understand spectacle. Both worlds know that a sharp insult can create interest. But the moment one side reaches for legal correspondence, the rules change. The record at the center of the story is W.Y.F.L, commonly understood as YUFING lying. According to reporting from Hollywood Unlocked and Baller Alert, the track directly addressed claims surrounding ghostwriting and included lines that listeners interpreted as shots at Papoose and Shields. The record reportedly appeared on streaming platforms and gained attention through social media circulation and Remy's performance activity. It later received another burst of attention when Remy performed it at an Angie Martinez summer barbecue event, according to Baller Alert. Now ask yourself why this mattered right now. It was not only about one song. It was about authorship, credibility, romantic betrayal, public image, and control over the narrative. If Papoose's public position is that he contributed significantly to Remy's music, then Remy's response is not merely an insult. It challenges his value inside the part of the culture where he believes he has authority. If Remy's position is that those claims are false or exaggerated, then the song becomes a way to reclaim authorship in front of an audience that has been debating the issue. And if Shields is being referenced, even indirectly, then she is being pulled into a conflict that is simultaneously personal, cultural, and promotional. She has her own athletic brand, her own music ambitions, and her own history of public verbal confrontations. The question is not simply whether Remy said something offensive. The question is whether the song became dangerous to the carefully managed public identities of the people who felt targeted. That is the tension driving everything else. Was the cease and desist primarily about protecting a family matter, or was it also about controlling a narrative that was beginning to move beyond the people who created it? The answer requires us to separate what is documented from what is being inferred, and then look at what happened in public. The first visible piece of evidence is the letter itself. According to Hollywood Unlocked, on April 18th, attorney Shelley Albert sent a letter to Remy's attorney, Diane Bowman, in connection with the couple's divorce case. The letter reportedly characterized parts of Remy's recording as profane, insulting, and highly negative remarks intended to embarrass Papoose publicly. It also reportedly quoted lyrics from the song and argued that the public conflict could have lasting consequences for the couple's young daughter. That is the first important detail. This was not described as a final court judgment ordering Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Music to remove the record. It was described as a cease-and-desist demand. A cease-and-desist letter is a warning and a request. It can communicate that one side believes conduct is unlawful or violates an agreement, and it can threaten future legal action. But a letter is not automatically a ruling. It does not, by itself, prove defamation. It does not automatically force a streaming service to remove a song. It does not settle who is telling the truth. And that distinction matters because people online often hear legal letter and assume the courtroom has already spoken. It has not. The letter may be serious. The consequences of ignoring it may be serious. But seriousness and legal proof are not the same thing. Does everybody understand how quickly the internet turns a warning into a conviction? The second visible piece of evidence is the timing. Baller Alert reported that the song was released on April 10th and that the letter followed on April 18th. 8 days. That is a very short window between a song becoming public and a lawyer sending a formal demand. Whether you view that as justified protection or an overreaction depends on what you think the song was doing, but the timing tells us one thing clearly: the record was not ignored. If the goal was to make the track disappear quietly, the letter did the opposite by creating a new news cycle. Before the document circulated, some listeners may have treated W.Y.F.L as another diss record in a long-running celebrity breakup. After the document circulated, the audience began listening like investigators. Fans searched for every lyric. They asked which lines referred to whom. They replayed the song for hidden names and coded references. The letter made the record feel like evidence. That is the strange power of a legal threat in the streaming era. A takedown demand can create more copies. A request to remove a post can inspire screenshots. A warning not to share something can become the reason everyone shares it. The old internet had the Streisand effect. Modern hip-hop has its own version. The moment somebody sends paperwork, the song becomes required listening. The third piece of evidence is the lyric dispute. The letter reportedly reproduced lines that listeners connected to Papoose's alleged ghostwriting claims and to Shields. Remy's bars attacked the idea that somebody claiming to have written hits had built a career writing for others. Other lines were interpreted as mocking Shields and the relationship. The language was harsh, but harsh language is the currency of diss records. Rap has always contained insults that would sound shocking outside the genre. Context does not make every statement legally protected, but it does affect how audiences understand the words. A diss record is not usually presented as a sworn affidavit. It is performance. It may use metaphor, exaggeration, insult, and persona. That does not mean anything said in a song is automatically immune from legal consequences. It means the legal analysis cannot simply be, the lyric is mean, therefore it is defamation. A defamation claim generally requires more than hurt feelings. It involves questions about whether a statement is presented as fact, whether it is false, whether it caused harm, and whether the speaker acted with the required level of fault. The exact standards can depend on the claim and the jurisdiction. So when the letter calls the song negative and insulting, that establishes the position of Papoose's legal team. It does not establish that every lyric is legally actionable. And this is where the difference between a personal complaint and a successful lawsuit becomes important. The fourth piece of evidence is the performance context. According to Baller Alert, Remy later performed W.Y.F.L at an Angie Martinez summer barbecue in Brooklyn. That transformed the song from a digital release into a live public moment. Live performance changes the energy. In the studio, the listener hears a recording. On stage, the crowd reacts, the artist controls the delivery, and the audience sees whether the artist is standing behind the material. A song that survives a legal warning and then appears in a public performance creates a different story than a song quietly uploaded and forgotten. It says the controversy is still alive. It says the artist is not treating the track as an accidental post. It says the record has become part of a broader public narrative. And then there's the fifth piece, the song's actual reach. Even when we do not have a verified chart position or audited streaming figure to cite, the public reaction itself becomes visible evidence of attention. Clips circulate. Commentary channels respond. Social media users debate the lines. The song appears in conversations that may not have existed without the surrounding relationship drama. That does not prove that Remy won commercially, but it does prove the record became culturally useful. It gave people a soundtrack for the argument. One person tried to turn a rap song into a legal exhibit. The other person turned the legal exhibit back into a cultural event. And that is where the surface evidence ends and the more revealing part begins. Because the real question is not only why the letter was sent. The question is what everybody involved believed the song could do if it remained available. Was the fear about one lyric? Was it about the combined effect of all the lyrics, the interviews, the performance, and the audience interpretation? Or was the fear that Remy's version of the story was becoming more memorable than the official explanations? And oh, do I have more for you? Because the letter is one thing, but the cultural reaction around it is where this gets even more uncomfortable. Papoose's side can argue that a family dispute should not be turned into entertainment. That is a fair argument on the surface. Claressa Shields can argue that people should not assume every lyric is about her. That is also fair. But when people publicly respond to a record, defend themselves, repeat the allegations, or explain why they feel targeted, they can unintentionally give the song another life. And I already know some of the Papoose supporters are going to say, he had every right to protect his name. Maybe he did. But then explain why the most effective response to a diss record would be to quote the lyrics in a legal letter and circulate the dispute to every commentary platform in the country. The next layer is not just about the letter. It is about interviews, boxing rivalries, social media reactions, and the way every public figure around this situation has been feeding the same attention cycle they claim to hate. The first piece of cultural evidence is the way the song was interpreted by listeners. Remy did not need to say Papoose or Claressa Shields in every bar for fans to make the connection. The audience already knew the context. They had seen the relationship headlines. They had heard the ghostwriting accusations discussed publicly. They knew Shields was connected to Papoose. They understood the timing. In rap, context can function like a name tag. That does not automatically prove that every interpretation is correct. It does show that the record landed in a pre-existing narrative. If you release a song after months of public arguments and then use lyrics about somebody's relationship, authorship, or behavior, listeners will connect the dots. That is not necessarily because they are being manipulated. Sometimes the connection is obvious. Sometimes the audience sees the same pattern the artist expects them to see. The second piece of evidence is the reaction from Claressa Shields herself and the broader history of her public music activity. Shields has openly participated in rap and has released or previewed diss material connected to her rivalry with Alicia Baumgardner. Hot 97 reported that Shields released Yeah GWOT, a flip of Glorilla's Yeah Glow that referenced her boxing accomplishments and took shots at Baumgartner after a public confrontation in Las Vegas. That is relevant because it complicates the argument that music should be completely separated from personal conflict. Shields understands the language of diss records. She has used rap as a competitive extension of boxing. She has turned rivalry into lyrics, branding, and spectacle. Again, that does not mean she has no right to object when somebody targets her. It means the public sees a contradiction when one person's diss track is framed as competitive expression while another person's diss track is framed as unacceptable misconduct. The difference may be intent, personal history, or the presence of a child. Those are serious distinctions. But culturally, the audience hears a simpler question. Can the microphone be used when it benefits one side, but become dangerous when the other side uses it? The third piece of cultural evidence is the response from Alicia Baumgartner. Hot 97 reported that after Shields released Yeah GWOT, Baumgartner responded with an Instagram post involving Glorilla and a caption referencing Yeah Glow. That exchange showed how boxing rivalries can move naturally into music, social media, and promotion. The performers know that a rivalry can generate attention. Their supporters understand the game. The audience is invited to pick a side. So when Remy uses music to respond to Papoose and Shields, she is operating inside a culture where public conflict is routinely converted into content. The difference is that her record is tied to an active divorce dispute and family issues, which raises the emotional stakes. But the machinery is the same. A personal conflict becomes a public narrative. A public narrative becomes content. Content becomes engagement. Engagement becomes power. The fourth piece of cultural evidence is the history of claims surrounding Papoose's role in Remy's music. Reports and social media commentary have described public accusations that Papoose wrote or contributed heavily to some of Remy's material. Remy's record appears to answer that narrative directly. The reason that matters is that authorship is not a minor issue in hip-hop. It is connected to authenticity, status, legacy, and respect. If a rapper says, "I wrote your hits," that statement positions the rapper as the hidden architect. If the artist being credited or discredited pushes back, the disagreement becomes a fight over identity. Who created the voice? Who deserves the credit? Who is supporting whom? Who is using the relationship as a platform? Even people who have never heard the underlying songs understand that this is about more than one verse. The fifth piece of cultural evidence is the way the public began comparing the different kinds of behavior in the story. Fans pointed out that Papoose and Shields have both participated in public confrontations, interviews, social media arguments, and music-related shots. Some supporters argued that those moments were different from Remy's record. Others argued that the entire group was using the same attention economy while criticizing only the person currently gaining momentum. There is a counterargument here, and we have to acknowledge it. A song can cause real harm. A public accusation can affect a child. A breakup can be painful enough without strangers turning every detail into a meme. If Papoose's legal team believed Remy violated a negotiated or proposed non-disparagement agreement, sending a letter may have been a reasonable legal step. If they believed the lyrics contained false factual claims rather than opinion or artistic expression, they could consult counsel. Nobody should be bullied out of protecting their legal rights simply because the dispute involves rappers. But here is where that argument begins to weaken as a public relations strategy. The more the legal response repeats the allegations, quotes the lyrics, and places the dispute into public circulation, the more the child protection argument collides with the publicity created by the response. You cannot claim the culture is harming the family while supplying the culture with a new document to analyze every line of the family conflict. The sixth piece of cultural evidence is the role of the commentary ecosystem. Channels, blogs, podcasts, and social accounts do not need official access to participate. They watch the same clips, quote the same letters, and build narratives from the same public material. A legal document that might have remained inside a case file can become a thumbnail, a headline, and a 20-minute debate. The story then grows independently of the original participants. That is what makes modern celebrity conflict so difficult to control. Years ago, you could give one interview and wait for the next magazine cycle. Now every performance is clipped, every caption is archived, and every legal filing can be summarized before the person involved has released a statement. The narrative becomes decentralized. Nobody owns it completely. And the final cultural point is the most uncomfortable. The audience may not actually care about the legal threat as much as it cares about what the legal threat reveals. Fans are asking why a rapper would respond to bars with paperwork. They're asking whether the song was more effective than expected. They're asking whether public confidence is real confidence if it disappears the moment somebody says something disrespectful. That does not mean the legal threat proves Remy's accusations. It means the response changed the emotional interpretation of the conflict. A person who ignores a diss can look unbothered. A person who responds aggressively can look offended. A person who sends lawyers can look serious, but may also look like the song reached somewhere sensitive. Image is not always determined by intent. Sometimes it is determined by contrast. The artist who keeps performing the record appears to be standing in the storm. The people trying to remove the record appear to be trying to control the weather. Now stop. This is where we have to leave the entertainment conversation, because if we keep treating this as nothing more than a messy rap beef, we miss the real mechanism. The deeper story is not who had the better line. The deeper story is how a diss record moves through copyright, defamation, family law, streaming platforms, boxing promotion, and celebrity branding at the same time. That is the pattern interrupt. We are no longer asking who won the argument on Instagram. We are asking who controls the distribution, who controls the framing, and who benefits from the public believing that this is only about personal feelings. Let's start with the legal mechanism. A cease-and-desist letter can serve several purposes at once. It can put the recipient on notice that the sender objects to specific conduct. It can preserve a record showing that the sender complained before escalating. It can create leverage in negotiation. It can warn that a lawsuit or amendment to existing filings may follow. It can also shape public perception by making the sender appear proactive and serious. But none of those functions guarantee victory. A demand to remove a song can run into questions about speech, artistic expression, opinion, parody, and whether a listener would understand the words as factual claims. Courts do not always treat lyrics like ordinary statements in a newspaper article. The context, genre, audience, tone, and surrounding circumstances may matter. A boast in a diss track may be understood differently from a formal public accusation made in a press conference. That does not make rap a lawless zone. Artists can still face legal exposure for certain false statements, threats, copyright violations, or contractual breaches. But the line is fact-specific. The phrase, "this is defamatory," is not magic. It does not transform an insult into a proven legal claim. It is a position that must eventually be tested if the dispute goes to court. Then consider non-disparagement. If the parties were actively working on an agreement, that is not necessarily the same as having a final enforceable agreement. A negotiation is not always a contract. The precise language, signatures, effective dates, consideration, and court approval can all matter. If an agreement already existed, the analysis changes. If it was only being discussed, the demand may be part of negotiation rather than proof of a breach. This is why we should not invent details about the divorce filings or claim that a judge ordered the song removed unless a verified court order says that. The publicly reported information supports the existence of a demand and a threatened possibility of further legal action. It does not automatically support a conclusion that Remy violated a binding settlement or that the courts have found her liable. And now the second systemic angle, the streaming economy. If the song is already on platforms, removing it is not like taking a flyer off a telephone pole. Digital distribution involves the artist, distributor, label or rights administrator, platform, and sometimes multiple versions of the recording. A platform may respond to a valid copyright complaint, a court order, or a contractual dispute. A personal objection alone may not be enough. That is why a legal letter can become a pressure tactic even before any platform acts. The sender may contact the artist's attorney, the distributor, event organizers, or other business partners. The goal may be to create enough uncertainty that the record is voluntarily removed. Platforms often do not want to become the center of a celebrity lawsuit. Risk management can matter as much as the merits, but pressure can backfire. If the track remains available, the audience may interpret that as a win for the artist. If it disappears, the audience may interpret that as proof that the song was dangerous. Either way, the controversy generates more attention. The takedown itself becomes content. This is the same reason old mixtape controversies created mythology. When a song is hard to find, people want it more. When a platform removes something, listeners search for alternate uploads. When a lawyer says, "Do not distribute this," fans hear, "There is something here worth hearing." The attention economy rewards conflict, even when every participant claims to dislike the conflict. The third systemic angle is celebrity branding. Papoose's brand has been tied to lyrical credibility and loyalty. Shields' brand is tied to toughness, championship status, and fearlessness. Remy's brand is tied to authenticity, survival, technical rapping, and refusing to be erased. When the dispute happens, every action is filtered through those identities. If Papoose raps back, he risks giving the record a traditional hip-hop answer, but he also enters Remy's preferred arena. If he ignores the song, critics may say it landed. If he uses lawyers, he signals seriousness, but risks looking like he does not want to compete musically. If Shields responds with another track, she reinforces the idea that she is a participant in the rap conflict. If she stays silent, the audience may say Remy controlled the frame. Remy, meanwhile, gets a strategic advantage from making the record. She can say she is expressing herself through art. She can perform it. She can allow the audience to debate the targets without always repeating their names. She does not have to prove that every listener interpreted every line correctly for the song to work culturally. The song's function is not only to establish facts. It is to establish a feeling. That is why this is not just a question of who wrote what. It is a battle over who gets to define reality. Papoose's alleged ghostwriting narrative says, "I was the hidden reason for her success." Remy's response says, "Do not rewrite my authorship." The Cease-And-Desist says, "Your version of the conflict has gone too far." Remy's continued visibility says, "You do not control what I create." The fourth systemic angle is boxing promotion. Claressa Shields and Alicia Baumgardner have already shown how boxing rivalries can spill into music and social media. In boxing, attention is a form of currency. A heated rivalry can increase ticket interest, pay-per-view interest, interviews, and sponsor visibility. The fighters may have genuine tension, but the business environment rewards public confrontation. That does not mean every argument is manufactured. It means real conflict can be amplified by incentives. A fighter who is talked about is more commercially relevant than a fighter who is ignored. A rapper connected to that fighter can become part of the same attention stream. A relationship headline can promote a fight. A fight can promote a song. A song can promote a podcast appearance. A podcast can create another headline. Everything loops back into everything else. And this is where the public starts confusing authenticity with usefulness. Something can be emotionally real and still be profitable. A person can genuinely be angry while also understanding that anger generates content. A diss can be heartfelt and strategically effective at the same time. The fact that the industry benefits does not prove the emotions are fake. It proves the system knows how to package emotions. The fifth systemic angle is media framing. A source publishes a legal document. Another outlet repeats it. A commentary channel reacts. Fans argue. The original source gets traffic. The outlet gets engagement. The artist gets attention. The audience gets a new villain. Then the next person responds, creating another cycle. Hollywood Unlock's report made the letter legible to a mainstream audience by describing the attorneys, the divorce case, the lyrics, and the demands. Baller Alert added timeline details and contextualized the release and later performance. These reports do not automatically prove every underlying allegation, but they show how the story moved from a legal correspondence into a media narrative. And once that happens, the legal document is no longer private in practical terms. It becomes part of the brand war. Each side can point to coverage that supports its framing. One side says, "We are protecting our family." The other side says, "They are trying to silence the music." Commentators choose which frame they prefer, and the audience joins the argument. That brings us to the sixth and final systemic angle, the difference between control and credibility. A person can sometimes control a platform, a filing, or a demand. But they cannot fully control how the audience interprets the action. A removal request may be technically successful and culturally disastrous. A public response may be legally careful and emotionally revealing. A statement meant to close a story may become the reason the story continues. This is why the opening detail matters so much. The legal letter was reportedly sent in connection with a divorce dispute where both sides were said to be considering limits on public disparagement. Yet the letter itself became public and revived the song. That does not prove hypocrisy. It does show a structural contradiction. The system designed to contain the conflict became another vehicle for distributing it. And the audience saw that contradiction immediately. They did not need a law degree. They understood that telling people not to discuss something can create more discussion. They understood that quoting the lyrics can increase familiarity with the lyrics. They understood that calling attention to a song can make the song more memorable than it was before. At this point, the funny part is that everybody involved may be doing free promotion for everybody else. Remy's song promotes the controversy. The letter promotes Remy's song. Commentary channels promote the letter. The reactions promote the channels. Meanwhile, the audience is sitting there like, so are we listening to the song or preparing for a deposition? This is what happens when rap beef enters the group chat, family court, boxing media, and streaming business all at once. And remember the identity disruption from the beginning. The mainstream assumption is that the person with the legal document controls the story. But in entertainment, the person with the most powerful document is not always the person with the most powerful narrative. Sometimes the person who owns the emotional language wins the audience, while the other person owns the formal response. That is the deeper reason the cease and desist matters. It is not proof that Remy's allegations are true. It is proof that the conflict has moved into a zone where music, law, and public image are competing to define the same facts. And now we reach the truth bomb. The most damaging thing about this entire situation is not that Papoose sent a cease and desist. The most damaging thing is that the legal response appears to confirm how much power the song gained simply by being understood. Let me be precise. I am not saying the letter proves Remy Ma is right about ghostwriting. I am not saying every lyric is factually accurate. I am not saying a family dispute should be fought in public. I am not saying a lawyer cannot advise a client to send a demand. Those would be irresponsible conclusions. What I am saying is that the response changed the record's position in the culture. Before the letter, W.Y.F.L was a diss track that listeners could debate. After the letter, it became a diss track that the opposing side considered serious enough to address through counsel. The document gave the song consequence. It told the audience that these were not lines floating harmlessly in the background. These were lines that somebody believed could affect reputation, negotiation, or litigation. That is the trap. If the goal was to make Remy look reckless, the letter gave her a platform to look defiant. If the goal was to protect the family from public discussion, the letter created another wave of public discussion. If the goal was to preserve control during the divorce, the public dispute now included lawyers, lyrics, interviews, performances, and competing narratives. The attempt to shut down the record made the record more central. Again, that does not mean Papoose was wrong to be concerned. It means the public relations consequences are separate from the legal strategy. A legal letter may be rational in a legal context and still be disastrous in a culture where people judge confidence by how you respond to insults. And this is where Remy's role as the hero of this story becomes clear. Her advantage is not that every claim she makes has been proven. Her advantage is that she understands the medium. She knows the difference between a statement, a song, and a performance. She knows how to make a line memorable. She knows how to create a phrase that people repeat. She knows that the audience does not need a legal exhibit to feel a song's impact. The most important line in the entire conflict may not be a lyric. It may be the fact that people remember the song's premise. They remember the accusation about ghostwriting. They remember the shots at the relationship. They remember the title. They remember that a lawyer responded. They remember that a request was made to remove the track. The legal response did not erase the narrative. It helped organize it. That is the consequence of trying to litigate a song in public. You may win an argument about procedure and still lose the emotional battle. You may prove that the language was harmful to you and still make the audience curious about why. You may persuade a court that certain statements were actionable and still be unable to persuade the culture that you looked unbothered. And the culture remembers optics. The same audience that might forget a social media argument in 48 hours can remember a cease and desist for years. Not because the letter proves guilt, but because it creates a symbol. It becomes shorthand for a celebrity conflict that crossed from bars into paperwork. It becomes the line people repeat when they say somebody could not take the heat. It becomes part of the mythology. That is what happened here. The story was supposed to be about a song. Then it became about whether the song should exist. Then it became about whether the response was consistent with the identities the participants had built. Papoose is supposed to be the rapper who can answer lyrical challenges. Shields is supposed to be the champion who does not back down. Remy is supposed to be the artist who turns pressure into performance. The response placed all three identities under examination. And the fallout is bigger than one family or one record. If every public dispute becomes a legal threat, artists may become more cautious, but they may also become less honest. If every diss is treated as a factual allegation, the line between artistic performance and journalism gets blurred. If every cease and desist becomes content, the legal system itself becomes part of the publicity machine. That is why the audience should resist the urge to declare every claim proven. The strongest analysis is not, the letter means Remy won. The strongest analysis is, the letter gave us information about what the other side feared the song could do. Those are different statements. One is a verdict. The other is an observation. And the observation is devastating to the strategy. Remy's song did not need a court ruling to become culturally effective. It needed people to repeat the title, debate the targets, and ask why the response was so serious. The cease and desist helped accomplish all three. So when somebody says, it was just legal protection, I understand the argument. But I also want you to look at the result. The song remained the center of conversation. The lyrics were repeated in reports. The names of the attorneys entered the story. The divorce became part of the entertainment cycle again. The exact thing the legal response was trying to contain became more visible. That is not a legal conclusion. That is a media conclusion. And the media conclusion is that Remy Ma won the first round of narrative control because she made the opposing side respond on her chosen battlefield. She created the music. She established the emotional frame. Then the response gave the frame official-looking paperwork. The people listening now are not only asking whether Remy's bars were good. They are asking whether they were accurate, whether they were dangerous, and whether the people named in the controversy are losing control. That is the truth bomb. The letter did not silence Remy's version. It authenticated the existence of a fight over her version. Now, let's bring this back to the hero resolution, because the point is not to celebrate every public insult or pretend that chaos is automatically courage. The point is to understand why Remy Ma's position remains powerful even while the legal questions stay unresolved. Remy's strength in this situation comes from consistency of medium. She responded through music. She performed the record. She allowed the audience to process the bars as bars. That does not make her immune from criticism. It does mean her actions align with the identity she has built as a rapper. When the pressure arrived, she created. Papoose's position is more complicated. He may have legitimate concerns about family privacy, reputational harm, and the boundaries of a divorce dispute. But the public sees a man associated with rap culture responding to a rap record through a legal warning. Whether that is fair or unfair, it changes the image. The audience begins asking why he did not answer in the language he has spent his career mastering. Shields' position is also complicated. She is a champion with every right to defend her name. But because she has used music and public rivalry as part of her own brand, people naturally compare her response to Remy's. The question is not whether Shields is allowed to be upset. The question is whether the rules are being applied evenly. And this is where discipline matters. The person who stays focused on creating, performing, and letting the audience decide often survives the longest. The person who chases every insult can become trapped in the reaction cycle. The person who builds the brand around toughness has to understand that toughness is measured not only by what you say when you are winning, but by what you do when somebody else controls the conversation. Remy did not need to prove every allegation in one song. She needed to make the public question the story they had been given. She did that. The title itself is a question. The lyrics are a challenge. The performance turns the challenge into a public moment. The legal response turns the public moment into a larger investigation. One person made a record that people wanted to replay. The other side made a legal document that made people replay the record. That is the contrast. And I know some people will say this entire thing is ugly, and they are right. There is a child involved. There is a divorce involved. There are personal allegations involved. Nobody should harass anyone involved, and nobody should treat disputed claims as established facts. But acknowledging the ugliness does not require pretending the public strategy is effective. Sometimes the honest truth is that every side has contributed to the spectacle, even while claiming to want privacy. What I want everybody to understand is that the culture is not only watching the accusations. It is watching the behavior after the accusations. Who creates? Who reacts? Who explains? Who threatens? Who performs? Who gets pulled into a new headline every week? Those patterns tell the audience more than one carefully written statement ever could. This is why Remy remains the emotional winner of the moment. Not because a song settles a divorce. Not because a viral performance proves a legal claim. Not because the other side has no argument. She is winning because she is the person whose artistic response created the question that everybody else is now answering. The right person is not always the person who looks the cleanest in a headline. Sometimes the right person is the one who refuses to let other people rewrite their role. Remy's public position is that her voice and her work belong to her. W.Y.F.L is part of that refusal. Whether the courts ever address the underlying accusations, the cultural argument has already happened. And the audience heard it. So where does this go from here? This is only the start. The next development to watch is whether the threatened legal action becomes an actual filing or remains a warning. A cease-and-desist letter can end with compliance, negotiation, a revised agreement, or nothing beyond the initial demand. If a formal lawsuit or amended filing appears, the language and claims will matter. Do not rely on thumbnails. Read what is actually alleged and what relief is actually requested. The second development is whether Remy continues performing or promoting the song. If she performs it again, the controversy gains another live chapter. If she releases additional music, every bar may be interpreted through the same dispute. If the song disappears from a platform, people will ask why. If it stays available, people will say the legal pressure did not work. Either result will generate another cycle. The third development is what happens with Shields' boxing world. Her public rivalry with Alicia Baumgardner has already shown how boxing, music, and promotion can overlap. If that rivalry moves forward, the personal drama surrounding Shields may become part of the attention landscape. If it stalls, the surrounding controversy may become even more important because public conflict can fill the space that competition leaves behind. And the fourth development is the divorce itself. As long as the legal relationship remains unresolved, every public statement has the potential to become evidence, leverage, or another headline. That is why the smartest move for everybody involved may be to stop feeding the cycle. But whether they can do that is the real question, because attention has become part of the conflict. If you made it this far, you already understand what the surface-level story missed. This was never only about one song. It was about authorship, identity, legal pressure, public image, and who gets to tell the story after a relationship ends. Remy brought the record. Papoose's side brought the letter. The audience brought the verdict that nobody can officially issue, who looked like they controlled the moment. And right now, the answer is Remy Ma, because the song is still being discussed, the lyrics are still being repeated, and the legal response became part of the track's mythology. The next story you need to watch is the one where a boxing rivalry stops looking like promotion and starts looking like a business emergency. Because while everybody is arguing about who can rap, there is another question hiding underneath. What happens when a fighter's public feud becomes more profitable than the actual fight? That is where the contracts, ticket numbers, promotional incentives, and carefully manufactured outrage start lining up. The person everybody calls the villain may not be the person losing. And the person everybody thinks is winning may be the one being used to sell the entire machine. That story is coming next. But this one already gave us the warning. When the paperwork arrives after the punchline may have landed harder than anybody wanted to admit.